Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service video. In this episode we have kind of a, I think, relatively rare and unusual Spincast reel made by Shimano called the Shimano Aerocast 1. And I really cannot find much information on this thing, including when it was likely made. Maybe the only clue is that it was made in Japan, and so that might make me sort of guess 70s to maybe early 80s. So late 70s, maybe early 80s would be my guess. But I just don't know. There's just can't find any information out there on them. So if you know anything about when they were made, put it in the comments. Here's another little label. It says Shimano JJ-1, whatever that is. So the thing that strikes me about this reel is that it looks, it's certainly a predecessor to, and of course not by the same company, but it sure looks an awful lot. It reminds me a lot of the Zebco Bullet, which is one of my favorite reels. If you've not used a Zebco Bullet, do yourself a favor. One of the smoothest, most enjoyable reels to fish. This is the smaller of the Zebco Bullets, the 22. But, even the relatively large-sized hole through which the line comes, the handles are really similar. This one's aerodynamic, but not quite as rounded off as the Bullet. But boy, those sure remind me of each other, and I wonder if Zebco kind of took some ideas off of the Shimano Aerocast. Who knows? So at any rate, let's go ahead and tear into this one. It's really stiff. It's really stiff. So this hasn't been serviced probably in a long time. Another neat thing about this one is that the cover comes off like opening the hood of a car. So you've got these two little push buttons here, and you push those in, and then it's actually hinged back here, but in this case one of the little hinge pieces is broken off. Really doesn't affect it at all. It still attaches at 3 points, so I'm not gonna, I could take a piece of plastic and epoxy it to there and fashion a hinge for it. But I don't think I really need to bother with that. So there's the cover, put that in the parts tray, and I'm thinking this, let's see here, will this just lift out of there? Will the guts just lift out of there is the question. Nope, there's a screw on the bottom. So to get the guts to come out, we have to get that screw off of the bottom. That looks to be what holds the internals in place. So that's pretty unique also. And so now, there you go. So it's got some old line on there, and I'm going to take that off just like that. And now we should let's see here, I think we have to take that nut off there to get the spinner head off. Okay, so there's the nut that holds the spinner head on, and there you can see the line pickup pin, and I don't see any cuts on the spinner head, and I don't see much in the way of any cuts on the pickup pin. The line stop still seems to be relatively soft. So no problem there. That could go in the parts tray. This can go in the parts tray. Let's see about getting the spool out. Looks like an E-clip. So you've got an E-clip there, and then off comes the spool. There, it looks like there's a metal washer and a fiber washer on top of the spool, and some nasty old grease. You put the spool away, and then you have these are really more like what I would call felt washers. I mean, they're really soft felt, and they're really seem to be really heavily impregnated with grease. And then you just have a pressure plate there, it looks like. Thought maybe there'd be another metal washer before the pressure plate, but apparently not. So unless it's missing. But then you've got your pressure plate there. And so those two little tines there straddle that notch or post or whatever you want to call that right there. And then the drag is just basically this screw, and that pushes up against this tab on your pressure plate and provides your drag. So quite frankly, to get that drag off there, I think you can just unscrew this whole deal right here. And there's your drag knob and drag screw. And there is a spring on that. So I was going to say be careful and don't lose that, and I just about lost it. So that spring goes over that bolt that goes through the drag knob. So that's, boy, it's really dirty in there. So now basically all we have left to do, I think, is pretty much, because this should come out now. Yeah, looks like there's like a little washer. No, that's maybe, it looks like it's part of, no. Let's see here. It almost looks like it's part of the, I don't think it's part of the pinion gear, but there's a washer in there that's preventing that from popping out this way. And so I think we're going to have to take off the E-clip that holds that spring on there. So I'm going to pull down the spring and try to get a hold of that E-clip. Oh, boy, that's on there tight. Come on off of there. There it comes. And then let that spring off. And then we can push the axle shaft out through the front. And yeah, I don't know why that wouldn't. It acted like this was stuck to the axle shaft. I don't know why that wouldn't pull out without having to take off the spring and stuff. But at any rate, that's off. And now to get the main gear out of here, just taking a look at my anti-reverse here. That looks relatively simple, although there is a spring. There is a spring wrapped around this main gear that we've got to be mindful of. And it looked, boy, there's a bunch of grease or something. There's a ton of grease obscuring the view here. Okay, that spring goes into a hole in the anti-reverse. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that when we put it back together. There's a spring around here, and it goes, the end of it bends and goes into a tiny hole in the anti-reverse pawl. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the handle now. I'm going to just use a coin for this. And so there's a bolt, and there's a locking washer, and then your handle. And then I think we should be able to just slide this out. I mean, it's really bound up with grease, so it's just not coming out real easy. Okay, and then so there's your scruddy old main gear. And this anti-reverse does come off, so it fits in there like that. So this little tab goes down into a hole there. This whole circular hole goes on the post, and then this long tab comes out towards the anti-reverse gear. So I'll go ahead and take off the pawl so that can be cleaned. And that gets us down to fully disassembled. So, with that, I'm going to take these parts to the sink, scrub them with a toothbrush and Dawn dishwashing soap, and WD-40 down in all the journals and so on to help loosen up that grease. I'll take cotton swabs through all those, and I'll be back just like that. All right, let's get these parts spread out here. One thing I'm going to do quickly is take a little bit of steel wool and shine up these shafts a little bit. And start reassembling here. So I think the last thing we took out, I believe, was the main gear. So that involves putting in the anti-reverse pawl first, and then I'll go ahead and grease the teeth of the main gear, and then oil the main gear shaft, and probably should put a little grease on the cogs on the anti-reverse gear. That helps quiet that down sometimes. And then insert that, making sure that that point on that spring goes into the hole that, let's see, that hole right there. So when I slide that down, that tip of that spring needs to go in that hole. So at this point, we can go ahead and put the handle back on. Which had a little lock washer on it, and then the screw or bolt, technically a bolt. Okay, and checking the anti-reverse, that's working fine. Now the main gear shaft and pinion. So we're going to go ahead and oil this. And I'm going to go ahead and put this little washer on as I thread that shaft through there. And then I'm going to put the pinion gear on there and run that up through. And then go ahead and get our spring on there and our E-clip. All right. Get on there. Now what? Okay. Now we can go ahead and grease the pinion gear. And that's working very nicely. Okay. I think we can go ahead and screw the drag adjustment knob back in. So we put that bolt in there and get her started. There it goes. Now we don't want to screw that in all the way. Just level with the inside of the housing there, because we don't want any pressure on it when we reassemble the thing. So leave it like that for now. Then we have our pressure plate that goes on there. And remember, there was not, in this case, a metal washer on top of the pressure plate. Sometimes there is, but we just have these felt washers. And I don't know the extent to which these really should be lubricated. They're relatively quote-unquote wet already, so I'm going to leave it at that. I will grease the post around which the spool spins, and this up here just to put less wear and tear on the pickup pin lever. And then we're ready for our, and this is your bait clicker right here, this thing. So if you want, you can bend that up a tad if you think it's sprung, so that you get a nice clicking sound when your drag is being taken. So we have this other, I don't know, that one's a little dry. I might just take and put just a tad bit of grease on that. And so that goes down there. And then we had this metal washer. The purpose of those little ears on there, I have no idea. Don't know. And then we've got our clip here, our E-clip. See here, that wasn't all the way down. Oh, okay, so now we know that the purpose of those ears are, there's a little notch that each one of those fits into. If you don't get one of those ears in each of the notches, the metal drag washer doesn't go down far enough, and then you can't slide your E-clip into the slot. Get it in there. Now I got greasy, buttery fingers here. Come on. There. So if now we can kind of get an idea that our drag's working. So clockwise turn is going to be pushing that screw out into the pressure plate. Now it's much harder to turn. If we really crank it down, boy, it's really hard to turn. Of course, you can get it to the point where you can barely turn it. If we back it off, it moves much easier. Okay, so now we're ready for the spinner head, and we have to lubricate that pivot point, and then let it seep underneath the nylon arm there so that it lubricates it as it rides on the inside of the spinner head. And then it's a D-shaped hole and a D-shaped axle shaft, so just line those up. Then we have this nut here. Where's my tool that I was using? So the pin is, whoa, that's not good. Let's see. Try that. Okay, there it goes. I didn't push the button in all the way. For a second there, the pin wasn't going all the way in, but it is now. All right, so now we're basically ready to put this thing back in the body and button it up. So it just slides in. Like, there's this post down here that's threaded, and that fits in that hole there, and then the housing for the main gear shaft slides in there, and then we just take and put this bolt in here. Tighten that down, and then put our hinge into place back here and line up these two buttons. Push down. Give it a good wipe. Put in some lubricant into the knobs on the crank handle. And there you have what I think, depending on how you characterize the terms uncommon, rare, scarce, I think a rare Shimano Aerocast 1, made in Japan, presumably in the mid to late 70s or early 80s, but I just don't know. So if you know, leave a comment. This will be a good resource for those people that have these and want to know about them, because there just isn't much, just a couple photos on sales sites on the internet, and that's all I could find. But I didn't, do a ton of digging, but that's about all I could find. So hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.